really lucky tonight, and genuinely really lucky. And firstly, this is the first Chew the Fat for a long time. The reason for that is when we kind of came up with this idea of people in conversation, we wanted those people to be really interesting. Trouble is, there's not that many interesting people in the world. So trying to create a monthly sort of interesting event means that you have to wait a while. And we are so privileged to have someone who is completely blowing up the stories, the ideas, a whole bunch of sort of co-joined concepts. He's a massive deal in the Valley. He is changing the way that people think about products. And in my history, I've ended up sort of doing marketing, programming, and I've done a lot of product development. And one of the fascinating things about this book, when I read it, was how much he's managed to pull down the sort of concepts that I'd learned the hard way through A/B testing, through multivariate testing, through just fucking it up and pissing my bosses off. And I think this book is a fascinating book into the insight of what it is that we're trying to build. Now, within that comes some really interesting questions regarding humanity, technology, and psychology. We'll try and explore some of those concepts with him and try and talk about it. There's a few thank yous to be made. The first thank you is, and I'd like you to put your hands together in that sort of smashy palm thing called clapping. If you could give it up for Bold Rocket for giving us this space this evening. They've been incredibly generous. Thank you so much. I would also like, especially given the announcement of last week, I would like to thank both Mike and Joe and all of the Three Beards for their tireless contribution to this scene. Thank you so much. Lastly, I'd like to thank Annie from Penguin for making all of this possible, so please give it up for the fantastic Penguin who brought this fantastic community tours. And finally, if you could please place your hands together for Nir Eyal, author of Hooked.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Right then. So, this book has been wildly successful.
Thanks.
And is, you know, you have this fantastic quote from Eric Ries, a must-read for everyone who cares about driving customer engagement. The author of Lean Startup, one of the people who's really sort of transformed how we think about not only sort of product development, but customer development, and also startups in the sort of modern age. How did you kind of end up here? What's your sort of background? What's your story? And you know, not quite why should we listen to you, but you know, where have you come from that kind of made you want to write this book?
Sure. So at my last company, I was at the intersection of gaming and advertising.
Okay.
And these are two industries that, let's face it, are very much dependent on mind control. Right? Advertisers don't spend all that money for their health. They're trying to change user behavior, customer behavior to get you to buy stuff. And of course, the gaming industry, well, don't get me started on the gaming industry. We know that industry is very much designed about changing user behavior through these experiences. And so at the intersection of these two industries at my last company, I saw a lot of experiments. I saw a lot of companies come and go, a lot of games, a lot of campaigns come and go. And I saw that a lot of these companies were using these techniques that they knew worked, right? They would see their competitor using these techniques. They would see that they were successful for whatever reason. They'd stumble upon them sometimes. But they didn't really know why. There wasn't this understanding around the deeper psychology around why people do what they do. And so there wasn't this codification of a how-to guide of how we can apply this deeper psychology of user behavior. And so that's what I wanted to build, and that's what I wanted to write. So after that last company was acquired, I took some time and tried to figure out what I wanted to do next. And my hypothesis was that I was dead set on starting another company, but I realized that I had this kind of epiphany that as the interface shrinks, as we go from desktop to laptop to now mobile devices and very soon wearables, habits matter more. That there's just less real estate available to trigger people the way we could with other interfaces. And so I really believed that habits were going to matter. And so I wanted to explore, well, what's this deeper psychology of how habits work and how do products change our own habits? And so that's where I started exploring this about 3.5 years ago. And I'm still looking for the next company to start. I haven't found it yet, but this was really done in the process of kind of these questions that I wanted answered to figure out what is it about these companies that we've all seen over the past, 5 years to a decade, we've all watched these companies come out of nowhere and change users' day-to-day lives profoundly through these gadgets that we're all carrying around with us, and touch the lives of hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, and of course make hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So I wanted to understand what it was about the Facebooks and Pinterests and Instagrams and Twitters that made them so big, so quick, and so good at changing user behavior.
And so what's your background? Where have you kind of personally come from? Where did you grow up? Did you go to university? Kind of all that sort of stuff, the fun stuff.
The fun stuff. So I was born in Israel, moved to the United States when I was 3 years old, and started a company out of college in the renewable energy space. And then that company was acquired, went to Stanford for my MBA, and then started a company while at school. The second year of school was kind of spent skipping a lot of classes and working on this business with some of my classmates. And that company then we sold about 3 years later. So
you have 2 acquisitions kind of under your belt. And this sort of interest about psychology, where does that come from? Is that something?
That was really about being in the advertising and gaming space, having been in that industry and seeing how impactful these techniques are in changing user behavior. I also became fascinated. I'm sure many of you have read the great books by Daniel Kahneman and Dan Ariely, and a lot of great psychology out there. But what I was struggling with was a how-to guide. I wanted a book that told me what to do next, right? Tell me step by step how I can apply this to help people do the behaviors I was designing for them. Because we were building experiences that I thought were good for people, and yet many times I found that despite our hardest efforts, the user wasn't doing what we designed for them to do. And so that was very frustrating.
We can all put methodologies in place. We can all apply them, and I'm sure that everyone here has used a variety of different techniques to try and kind of build something that functions. That cognitive dissonance of saying, well, look, we don't really know what to build next. What was it that before made you sort of come to this idea that people were somehow going to be powered either by habit or slash addiction or slash desire?
Yeah.
At what moment did you kind of realise that was the key? And was it an epiphany, or was it a sort of backwardly applied logic?
No, I think it was a slow evolution of trying to figure out. I've got reams of paper that I've played with different ideas, different models, and it was when I started seeing these 4 basic elements repeated time and time again, and I would run different products through this model and say, okay, well that fits the hook. This doesn't fit the hook. Is the hook broken? What's missing in this model? Does it apply time and time again, or is it not sound? And then through a lot of academic research, a lot of reading through very boring literature and trying to figure out what applies and what doesn't, I came down to these 4 fundamental steps that we see in the hook model today.
Hands up, who's read the book so far? Okay, the rest of you are in for an absolute treat. So let's talk about those 4 basic models briefly, and then we'll kind of get into companies that sort of extemporise those quite well. So if you could take us through the 4 steps, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the 4 steps of the hook are that we start with a trigger. A trigger is a cue to action, and there are 2 types of triggers. We have external triggers and internal triggers. External triggers are things in the environment that tell you what to do next. So something that has the information for what to do next in the trigger itself. So a call to action like click here, or buy now, or play this, or in the physical world, it might be a friend telling you about this app you should try out. These are all examples of external triggers. The information is in the trigger itself. Product people know all about that, right? Designers, entrepreneurs, that's our craft, right? That's what we do for a living, is design many of these external triggers. But what many product people don't consider, and what turns out to be absolutely critical in forming these long-term habits, is forming an association with what's called an internal trigger. So an internal trigger is something that cues the user to action just as reliably as those external triggers, but the information for what to do next is not in the trigger itself, but instead informed through an association in the user's mind. So what we do in response to a certain situation, a routine, a place, certain people, and most frequently in response to an emotion, dictates what we do next. And not just any emotion, but turns out negative emotions. So what we do in response to feeling bored or lonesome or indecisive or all of these negative emotions cue us to action. These are the pain points that we seek relief from the products we use. So you're feeling lonely, we check Facebook. You're feeling uncertain before you scan your brain, you're on Google. You're bored and you're checking YouTube or the news or stock prices or sports scores or Pinterest. Lots of solutions for this internal trigger of boredom, because these internal triggers are negative valence states, as psychologists call them. They feel bad, and we seek to be taken out of those negative valence states. So after the trigger comes the action. The action is the habit itself. It's the behavior done with little or no conscious thought. And these action phases tend to be these actions that are the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. So something very, very simple that can be done to get the reward. So clicking on the play button on YouTube, or searching on Google, or scrolling on Pinterest, all examples of the action phase. Then comes the variable reward. So the variable reward is where the user gets what they want. It's where their itch is scratched, so to speak. And not only is the reward, is the user given the reward, but it turns out that time and time again we see that the reward has this element of mystery, right? It either alleviates some kind of uncertainty, or it even provides some bit of variability. And this comes out of the classic work of B.F. Skinner. Who's heard of Skinner? Just curious. Okay, a lot of people. Great. I think the number is increasing. But father of operant conditioning, you probably have heard of him before, even if you don't remember. He was probably one of the people you studied in your first psychology class. The father of operant conditioning, he found that when you take, in his case, pigeons, he used these lab pigeons, he put them in a little box, he gave them a little disc to press on, and every time they would peck at this disc, they would receive a reward. They would receive a food pellet. And so basically Skinner observed that he could train his pigeons to peck at this disc whenever they were hungry. But then Skinner did something a little bit different. He introduced a variable reward. So sometimes the pigeon would peck at this disc, nothing would happen, right? No reward would come out. The next time the pigeon would peck at this disc, they would receive a reward. And what Skinner observed was that the rate of response, the number of times the pigeons clicked on this disc, increased when the reward was given on a variable schedule of reinforcement. So in all sorts of products that we find most habit-forming, most engaging, we will see some element of mystery, some element of variability.
If the reward is variable, the outcome is uncertain.
Right.
So thus that would always create an increase of activity because it's uncertain. Now I'm not entirely convinced. In my mind, a pigeon is a stupid animal. I mean, I don't know if you've seen them walking around London, but they're pretty idiotic. Sort of, they're more irritating than most commuters. And the act of randomly bashing its head against a sort of object in the hope that a device comes out, I wasn't sure was reward related as much as it is just a single sort of input versus output deal, which is thing. Thing. I could do this about 90 minutes, by the way. I was practicing earlier.
But you're going to hurt yourself there.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's true. And there's a great example in the book, which I think for me proves it more clear, is the Alton Milner study regarding what lab mice would do. Because that to me seems, maybe it's I like mice more, I don't know, or I just really dislike pigeons. I'm kind of a pigeonist. But talk to me about the mice piece,
right?
Because I think I think for me that educates me more.
So I was summarizing the model here, but I start that chapter with the work of Alton Milner, this classic work that showed this the importance of this specific part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. And the nucleus accumbens was first studied in the 1940s. These two researchers basically implanted electrodes into the brains of these mice, and they allowed them to self-stimulate. They could activate this part of the brain by pushing on a little lever, and they found that the mice loved it, right? They would click on this button instead of eating food. They would forgo water. They would run across electrified grids that were very painful just to continue to stimulate this part of the brain. And of course, they did similar experiments on people where they allowed people to self-stimulate using these little buttons, and they would send an electrical current to their nucleus accumbens, and they would do so incessantly. Some people did this hundreds of times, and they had to have the machine forcibly removed to get them to stop activating this part of the brain. And of course, we do this with all sorts of things, right? That you don't need electrical current to stimulate your nucleus accumbens. All of your nucleus accumbens are stimulated every single day with luxury goods and junk food and sex and certain chemicals and, of course, our gadgets, right? That these things activate our nucleus accumbens all day long by creating what's called the stress of desire. That it used to be that the psychology community, up until about a decade or so ago, believed that the role of the nucleus accumbens, that the way the brain gets us to act, was because of pleasure. Right? Why else would lab animals and later people incessantly activate this part of the brain if it wasn't because it felt good, right? Not exactly. So what we now know, because of the miracle of fMRI studies, we can actually see what's happening in the brain during different reward cycles. And we see that the nucleus accumbens becomes most active not when the reward is received, but anticipation of the reward. So it becomes, we get this response when we're about to receive the thing that we want, the thing that we think is going to make us feel good, that we think is going to make us happy. But then, of course, when we get the thing we want, that's when the nucleus accumbens becomes less active. So it turns out that the way the brain gets us to act is by stimulating this itch, by stimulating this wanting, this craving response. And the way to supercharge that itch is, of course, what I talked about earlier, this variable reward, right? This bit of mystery, this uncertainty, the unknown, we see in all sorts of products that we find most engaging, the ones that capture our attention and won't let go, the ones that are most habit-forming, we will find some element of mystery. So the point isn't necessarily to create the variable reward. Sometimes it's to satisfy something that's inherently certain. So for example, Google doesn't want to increase the variability of its search results, right? That would be silly. It still has to scratch the user's itch, the internal trigger of uncertainty. When I don't know something, I immediately turn to Google to answer that question. But the very act of having a question in mind and looking for an answer, that is inherently uncertain. And so they're bringing order to some of the chaos. And that's how they're scratching the itch. Because the whole point of the variable reward phase is to give the user what they came for, to scratch the user's itch. And that's why it's so important to understand that internal trigger. It's very hard to scratch a user's itch until you understand what itch you're actually scratching. But then once you've done that, the idea is that these variable rewards present some bit of mystery, some bit of unknown around what the user is going to find the next time they engage with that product.
So, as I'm a highly addictive human, by this logic, then the waiting for the cigarette or the waiting for the beer is actually the bit I'm enjoying far more.
I don't know if it's enjoying, because we don't know if it's, because again,
it's more active. You mean.
Right. We don't know if it's actually
it's
pleasure. We don't think it's pleasure. It's the stress of desire.
Stress of it.
And in fact, a study that just showed recently something very similar to what you're saying. There was a great study that came out of a university in Israel that showed that they took two groups of smokers. They sent one group of smokers from Tel Aviv, I think it was to London, and the other group of smokers from Tel Aviv to New York City. And if the biological theory of addiction would say that craving should get more intense the longer the time span is between those behaviors, right? But when they surveyed these people and asked them to keep a log of their craving during this flight, they found that both groups experienced the most intense cravings, the stress of desire, equally at a certain time in the flight, 30 minutes before landing. Both groups, 30 minutes before landing, which means that even for that longer group, when it was impossible for them to smoke, they didn't experience that craving. But it was when it was suddenly nearby and they were anticipating it and they couldn't wait to get off the damn plane so they can light a cigarette, that's when that craving became most intense.
Interesting. So, whilst the reward may be, could the reward also be static? Do we know that, so for example, it's rare that the pint doesn't hit the spot in my life, I mean, that's mainly because I dislike people intensely, but, looking forward to that, so I did yoga recently, I really hurt myself, don't do it, just not recommend. Exercise is bad for you, is a definite fact.
I actually happen to agree with you on that, but we can talk about that later.
We'll get into that. And I was looking forward immensely to the drink. I was like, as you do, right? You're like, this beer is going to taste amazing. Now, to me, beer always does the same thing. I don't know if this is an alcoholic trait. Thanks, very good. Subliminal, you see what I did there? Hacking the man, hacking the man.
I'm fine, actually.
Don't make me look bad.
Okay, fine, bring over there.
But
All right.
But the reward is,
thank you.
The reward is kind of the same, right? In theory, right? So how does this variability...
Is it? Is it
This
really?
is what I'm asking.
Without
I don't know. For me, it feels like it is.
Right.
I mean, the first one always goes down a bit quick. And the second one I slow down, and the third one, as they always say, 1 is not enough, 2 is just right, 3 is too many, 4 is a cab ride home.
Right, right. So alcohol is an interesting one because You know, and as many drugs do, and by the way, the book is not how to create addictive products, right? There's a reason I called the book How to Create Habit-Forming Products. So let me just say real quick, there's a big difference between addictions and habits. That addictions are these behaviors that, one, hurt the user, right? By definition, addictions hurt the user, and the user cannot stop. Right? There's a lack of control there, a lack of agency around doing the behavior. So the book is not called How to Create Addictive Products. That's not our goal. We don't want to hurt our users. The book is about how to create habit-forming products. And of course, we do have bad habits, but we also have a lot of good habits. And so the inspiration behind the book is how can we help product designers create products that benefit people, right? Because many product designers that I know have products that really, truly do help people if they would only start using it. And so that's really what I wanted to help product designers do. The other reason I wrote the book is not only to help product designers, but I agree with what Paul Graham said, that the world is becoming a potentially more addictive place.
Yes.
And so that all of us need to understand as consumers how these technologies change our behavior, and that these behaviors are not changed by chance. These kids who created these products, many of them I call kids intentionally, they didn't just get lucky. That these products they are either designed or through trial and error exhibit these psychological traits that keep us engaged. So it's not just by mistake. But to your question around alcohol, I think there is a great deal about alcohol and about getting drunk. There's a lot of variability associated with that. Let's do some audience participation. What's the variability around intoxication? Shout it out. What do you think?
Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's shit.
Right.
That's just life, though, isn't it?
That's one, right? Anything else?
Get laid or lose your wallet.
There's what happens after you drink. There's
It's a really binary crowd. Good or shit, laid or lose your wallet. Brilliant. Amazing. I'm glad we're in the grey area.
What are you going to say?
You don't know what's going to happen. Something interesting might happen.
Right, something interesting might happen. The effect of the drink itself, right? What's a stiff drink from this brand going to do to you versus a stiff drink from a different brand? There's all sorts of variability, right? If you talk to drug addicts, they're looking for the next great high. Was that high? Was it this high or was it this high, right? There's this variability around what this particular hit is going to do to you. So there is a good deal of variability associated with it. I mean, it's all the stories, when it comes out to going out to and drinking too much, it's all the stories that come about after the event as well that are varying degrees of reward, so to speak.
So the reward is the story.
It's the experience itself, right?
So,
it's the fact that
alcohol is
there's
the facilitator upon the sort of variable reward, which is either whoever said the most kind of baseless line I think I've ever heard. You get laid or you lose your wallet, which kind of defines that man, I think, to a T there. I'd like to talk about, there's a fantastic case study in here, the Bible app.
Right.
And just talk us through the Bible app, and then I just find this such a fascinating, and there's a great quote I want to kind of pull up from that, but
yeah,
please.
Go for it.
No. So go on. Explain to people what I'm sure you can explain.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people use the Bible app. It's the number one Bible. If you look in the Apple App Store and search the Bible, this will be the first app that comes up. It has I think there are over 1 million installs today, and if you value the company based on the engagement rates and the install rates, I mean, it would be a multi-$100 million company. They don't make any money on this app. But the app has this great hook built into it, and I would say greatly enhances the lives of hundreds of millions of people today because of this greater access to something that they care very deeply about and they find very meaningful. And so you've got, I quote the CEO of the Bible app, Bobby Greenwald, in the book, and he talks about how he was told this story from somebody who was about to go into a strip club. And right before they got into the strip club, the Bible app sent them a push notification. And they said, holy shit, God, literally, holy shit, the Bible app is telling me something, right? God is speaking to me. And so in this case, this is an example of an external trigger prompting the user to action, to open this app, to check their daily Bible verse. There's all these variable rewards associated with using the app around this meaning that's provided by your daily scripture. And then there's investment as you save scripture. As you use the product more frequently, you're loading the next trigger and you're storing value in the product the more you use it. So the app actually adapts to the way you use the product and gets better and better over time. And it portrays the same exact hook that we find in other habit-forming technologies.
As you picked up, I'm skeptical of lots of things. The Bible being, religion is... Moving on. No, not at all. No, so religion, I believe, is one of the greatest habit-forming systems on earth, right? It's those who believe in some of the works of Dawkins, not necessarily, I'm not... I'm...
Look, you're making him leave.
I think he just needs a toilet. That or maybe he got a push notification from God. I'm spiritual personally, right? So I'm not. I don't wish to knock religion. I don't wish to knock spirituality. And I certainly do never ever wish to knock faith in any statement. But religions, through their very nature of the fact that they have survived for as long as they have, and right. Whether at whatever moment you decide to start separating religions out, fundamentally it comes out of stories, it comes out of a narrative, it comes out of a desire to explain the world. These are very natural human tendencies, right? Now, what struck me about this case study here is that the Bible has been, and many scriptures, other scriptures, across the world, are incredibly good at operating upon our fears, operating upon what you would call our internal triggers, operating upon our needs and our desires. And in the same way that Facebook does, the same way that Twitter does. And the reason these things are successful is because our unknowingness of our place in the world, what Dawkins talks about, the mean, right? The idea of the everlasting is a very attractive thought, right? The idea that we could become more popular via Facebook, we can become more famous via Twitter, we can become more attractive via Tinder. These are very attractive concepts. Mm-hmm. And what I found so interesting here, especially in this case study, was not only this bizarre idea that the valuation of a Bible app could be judged by its user base, because by that means we should...
Why is that? Why? Because you said earlier that Facebook isn't monetizing, and that is not true. I mean, it's
not monetizing the value of which it's currently placed.
But that's an investor problem. That's not Zuckerberg's problem, right? The fact that
it will eventually become Zuckerberg's problem unless he walks away quickly.
I don't think he gives a shit what the stock price is, frankly. I don't think Bezos gives a shit what the stock price is. That these companies that are building based on engagement, Zuckerberg is not looking to be wealthier. It's kind of hard for him to be wealthier at this point. What he cares about, I think, I don't know the guy personally, he's trying to make an impact. He's trying to leave a legacy, right? He's trying to, I hope, improve the world. And to say that these companies are this is not vaporware. This is not the 90s tech bubble where there was nothing there. Facebook made billions in revenue at incredibly high valuations. Because an app that's used as much as Facebook is used, if you have that engagement, then monetization is not so much a problem. You will figure out a way to monetize, because remember, every business has these three core pillars. At least that's how I look at companies I invest in, companies that I consult for. I'm always looking for these three pillars of growth, engagement, and monetization. And this book, Hooked, is just about engagement. That's center pillar. That each of these three things is necessary but not sufficient. I mean, if you have a business that has very high engagement and you nail the hook, that's great. But if only 10 people are using it and you have no idea how you're ever going to monetize, then you have nothing, right? So you have to have growth, you have to have engagement, and you have to have monetization. So when I invest in a company, I'm looking for 2 out of 3 and a plan for the third. You don't have to have all three. Almost no startup. If you have all three, then you're not a startup anymore. You have an established, validated business model. But I look for 2 out of the 3, and then working a plan for the third. And so if nailing engagement is only one piece of the puzzle.
Let's open it up for questions.
A question I have, and I'm sure a lot of startups here and other people involved in that, is there room for another habit-forming product?
Excellent. Yeah, there is. And as much as habits are a competitive advantage, right? That's one of the business benefits of creating a habit is that you create barriers to entry. You make, the cold truth is that the best technology does not always win. Tomorrow, you could go to your bedroom and probably create a better social network. You could imagine one of those social networks that might be better technically. But of course, many of these companies have existing habits which are so strong that the best product doesn't always win. Let me give you an example here, actually. Raise your hand for me if you searched with Google in the past 24 hours. Who searched with Google? Okay. Now put your hand up if you've searched with Bing in the past 24 hours. Who searched with Bing? 2 Microsoft employees are here. Right? That, and you would think, okay, well, let's see, the vast majority of the room search with Google and not Bing today. It's because Google's a better product, right? It must just be a superior solution. Well, it turns out that if you do head-to-head comparisons, and Microsoft, of course, conducted these studies, but also independent parties have conducted these studies, that there's about a 50-50 split in terms of which search engine results people prefer when you take out the branding. So if you just see the search results, about a 50-50 split, and yet Google totally dominates, right, as shown by the hands in this room, the search market. Why? Because we formed a habit that whenever we're uncertain about something, Google is where we go. We don't even consider the alternative. Did you know that Bing actually pays you to search? Bing will actually pay you these points that you can turn into money, and I have no affiliation with Microsoft whatsoever. They will pay you to search with their search engine, but we don't even give them a chance because we formed this habit with a specific product. So habits are a huge competitive advantage. Now, so what do we do to displace an existing habit, right? If you have a better product or solution, what do you do to steal that habit away, for example, from an incumbent? There's only 3 ways to do that. There's only 3 ways to take a habit away from somebody. And that is, first, to increase the velocity through the hook. So if you can create a product that goes trigger, action, reward, and investment faster than your competitor, usually that's done in the action or investment phase. If you make that action or investment easier in some way, more convenient, you can go through that hook faster. That's way number 1, increase velocity through the hook. The second way is to increase frequency of going through the hook. Right? So one is velocity, right, through the hook, and then the other is how frequently you go through the hook. And that usually happens when there's an interface change. So when a product goes from desktop to laptop to now mobile devices and very soon wearables, every time there's that interface shift and the way we interact with technology changes in this, these profound ways of how the interface, that's when the habit deck gets reshuffled and habits are formed anew. And that happens because the frequency with which we can interact with these things changes, right? So now we're not confined to our desks anymore because we're carrying our laptops around, and now we're really using these products more frequently because they're in our pockets, and very soon they're going to be on our wrists. So now that we're going through these hooks more frequently, all kinds of new market entrants can reshuffle that habit deck and establish these new habits, whereas the incumbents usually lag behind, right? They've got some kind of other interest that doesn't let them, move over to the new interface. The third way to do this is to make the reward more rewarding. So if you can figure out a way to scratch the user's itch better in that reward phase, to make it more interesting, more exciting, to reward the user more than your competitor can, that's another way to establish new habits. So one of the reasons that Facebook is so scared of Snapchat and why they offered $3 billion for Snapchat and were rebuffed, and now Snapchat's raising at a $10 billion valuation, is because the reward is more rewarding. Right? If you receive simultaneously, if you receive a Facebook notification and a Snapchat notification, I would bet you're going to open that Snapchat notification first. Why? What's special about a Snapchat message? When I send someone a picture on Snapchat, what happens to it? It disappears. It explodes, right? So I send someone a picture and then it disappears forever. Well, what does that do to the pictures themselves?
Makes them rare.
It makes them to some degree rare, right? The fact that they're going away. It also gives people less discretion around what they're taking pictures of, right? They take sexy poses and they don't look exactly right, but that's okay because they're funny and they're interesting. It's things that you wouldn't put on Facebook. So if you receive a notification from Facebook that's probably from your Aunt Matilda, or you receive something on Snapchat, the reward is more rewarding if you've gotten that photo from Snapchat. And so you're more likely to use that product as opposed to the incumbent solution. So velocity through the hook, frequency through the hook or the reward becoming more rewarding.
Okay, so I've been trying to use. I've only read a little bit of your book and watched your.
Where are
sorry,
you?
here. I'm here. I've read a little bit and I watched your show on your webpage, and I started trying to use the idea to get my kids to do their homework, which is interesting. My question really is most of the things that you talk about have got a very low effort and very low reward. How far can you push that? How high an effort and how high a reward? Is there a tail off? I mean, how does that work?
Right. Do you guys mind if I stand up?
Yeah, no, I was doing that. It was
All right.
nice. I'm going to sit down now.
So one of the common characteristics around all these products is that they're very easy to start, and with increased investment, they become difficult to stop, right? I talk in the book around how they go from vitamins, these nice-to-haves, to painkillers, these must-haves, as they form these habits. But they're all used because they're want-tos, not have-tos. And that's a very important trait of these products. I see this a lot in products and entrepreneurs that my heart goes out for because they're trying to help people do things that they really don't want to do. And that is not easy. So let me give you an example. In the health space, and we've seen a whole host of products that try and make people healthier, specifically with these wearables and fitness apps. There's all these products that we attach to our bodies to help improve our health. And so many of them are doing it wrong because they're not following this rule of being a behavior that people want to do as opposed to have to do. And I actually haven't published this article yet, but I will here in the next few weeks, called Why Fitness Apps Make You Fat. You want me to tell you why fitness apps make you fat? Here's why. There's 3 reasons that most fitness apps, there are a few exceptions, but most fitness apps make us fat for 3 reasons. Number 1, they're incentivizing the wrong behavior. So most fitness apps have you count calories that you eat and count calories that you expend. Because the common wisdom is, that's a myth, is that a calorie in is a calorie and a calorie out. If you have a calorie surplus, you'll gain weight. If you have a calorie deficit, you lose weight. And that is factually and scientifically incorrect. Right? I'm not going to go into that too much. If you haven't read Gary Taub's Why We Get Fat, read the book. We know a calorie of sugar acts very differently in the body by releasing certain hormones, namely insulin. A calorie of sugar is not the same as a calorie of protein. Fact. So why are we treating calories as calories in all these fitness apps? That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that exercise, I'm going to agree with you on this one, exercise is bad for you. And here's why. I love killing sacred cows. Exercise is bad for you, asterisk, if you hate exercise. If you love exercise, exercise is great for you. But most people that are using these products, they're doing something that they don't want to do, and they're gamifying these experiences to try and give them these incentives to do it, but they're not making the behavior itself any more fun. And here's why exercising, if you hate exercise, is bad for you. Because we know that when we do things, when we expend willpower on things we don't like to do, we trigger what's called moral licensing. Moral licensing is when we're good in one area of our life, we're more likely to be bad in other areas of our life. It's like a balloon that when we squeeze on, we expand this other way. We've shown this in experiments that show that people who sacrifice by buying environmentally sound things, and this was a controlled lab experiment in a psychology lab, they gave people this opportunity to buy green products or regular products, and then they had them take this, test where they measured friendliness and how giving these people were, and the people who bought green were kind of schmucks afterwards. They were less friendly to people.
We're going to call time.
All right.
I think a huge round of applause for Nir there. He's rather foolishly admitted that he's an investor. He's rather foolishly agreed to stay around for a while. We've rather foolishly filled up several buckets with beer. So pitch him, question him, harass him, harangue him. He's there to be...
Why? All that?
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise, thank you for being such a great crowd. Thank you for your incredible questions. Thank you for listening. And thank you for participating. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Do you want me to give you a hand?